Hey, good morning, everyone. We are live with Wild Wonder Conference, and our opening guest, Tony Foster. This is really exciting to be here with you. Um, Tony, I have been following your work for years as a young naturalist and journal sketchbook artist. A buddy of mine at the California Academy of Sciences said that there's a show downtown in San Francisco. You've got to see it. And I thought, He dragged me over there and could not get me out of your exhibit. And I've been absolutely hooked ever since. And there's some of the people who are watching this are not really familiar with your work. And yet being the operative clause there. And so we've prepared a little video that kind of gives a little bit of the backstory and will help people understand just why it's so cool to get to kind of hang out with you a little bit. Before we run that clip, is there anything you wanted to say?
Well, only that I'm delighted to see you again, and I think we're going to have some fun for an hour, don't you?
I think so. I loved recording our session earlier. They had a hard time shutting us up, so this is going to be good.
I remember that.
All right. So for friends at home, here's a little bit of the backstory on Tony Foster in video form, and I think you'll see why this gentleman has such street cred in the nature journaling community, or as we could call it, river cred,
or forest cred, or mountain cred.
Mountain. That's right. It just depends on the journey. It depends on the journey. So let's run that, and then we'll be back, and we're going to play a little bit together here and share thoughts, ideas, and inspiration.
Welcome to an oasis in a hectic world. We can't wait to welcome you back to the Foster. We are temporarily closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but we will reopen in 2021. The Foster is a 14,000 square foot museum in Palo Alto, California that opened its doors in 2016. It exhibits the watercolor journeys of British artist-explorer Tony Foster.
The first thing they're confronted by is this enormous black and white photograph of the artist himself, me, but a younger version, at a place called Kaieteur Falls in Guyana. I was looking for a waterfall for my exhibition Watermarks, and I wanted one that wasn't a tourist attraction. So to find a fantastic waterfall that wasn't a tourist attraction is not an easy thing, because most big waterfalls are tourist attractions. Think of Niagara Falls, for example. But I didn't want that. I wanted one that was remote, very rarely visited, and therefore by its nature had to be difficult to get to. Kaieteur Falls absolutely fitted the bill.
2 complete watercolor journeys are on exhibition, as well as selected artworks from 15 other journeys. You will discover sacred places, watercolor diaries from the American Southwest, and exploring beauty.
For this exhibition, Exploring Beauty, Watercolor Diaries from the Wild, I invited luminaries from all sorts of fields, including Sir David Attenborough. I asked them if they would nominate the most beautiful wild place in the world that they had ever seen. My part of the show was to go to these places and to try and find what it was they had found that was so beautiful, and by means of my paintings, try and convey that beauty to the audience. I have to travel to these very remote places, so I have to hike into them, or I go in by kayak or canoe. I've developed a 7-foot-by-4 drawing board which folds up and fits on a backpack. I have a tiny paint box the size of a packet of cigarettes. My mixing palette is the top of a Tupperware container, Everything is as light as possible and as simple as possible. I do find that the longer I'm absorbed into a place, the better the paintings are. The biggest one took me 23 days actually sitting in the same place at the rim of the Grand Canyon. When Sir David Attenborough suggested that tropical coral reefs were, he thought, the most beautiful places in the world, I thought I can actually devise a way of doing this. For this exhibition, I've pretty well drawn on everything I've learned in the last 30 years in order to make this particular series of work, because it's tested every single aspect of the world that I know. All my work's been about wilderness for the last 30 years, and in many ways getting to wilder and wilder places, the more my confidence grew. These places are under threat. We can't pretend they aren't. They're very, very fragile. And if my work can be used as a kind of argument to sustain and preserve these places, then that would be a very good thing.
The Foster was founded to unite, enrich, and share. Artists explore Tony Foster's powerful watercolor journeys to inspire reflection, discussion, and education about art, wilderness, and the natural world.
What is a Tony Foster journey? Let's take a look at the different elements.
A Tony Foster journey is a composition of artworks inspired by a geographic or philosophical theme.
Tony has created 18 journeys, consisting of nearly 500 artworks over 40 years. An artwork consists of one or more watercolor paintings and uniquely related souvenirs. Souvenirs often include studies, artifacts, maps, diary excerpts, and talismans. Here's an example of an artwork, and this series of 3 is also an artwork.
Welcome. I'm one of your tour guides here at the Foster, and this is artist explorer Tony Foster on one of his painting journeys. Tony Foster lives in Tywardreath, England, a one-pub town in the southwest county of Cornwall. Though he largely paints in the open air, Tony completes his watercolor paintings in his studio, referring only to his notes and memory, never photographs. And as we continue the tour, we have a timeline showcasing the evolution of Tony Foster's watercolor journeys. And below the timeline, we have several exhibition catalogs. Now we'll continue into Exploring Beauty, Watercolor Diaries from the Wild.
So on the way to that...
Tony Foster's hyper-engaged way of seeing and painting place is part of a long tradition of artists. His closest artistic heritage is with 19th century artists such as Thomas Moran and George Catlin, who adventured into the American West to record and make visible the treasures encountered there. Like his 19th century predecessors, Tony Foster uses his painterly skill in celebration of nature and the exquisite forces evident in wild places. His process, which necessitates being able to withstand grueling conditions as well as significant patience, reinforces the message that none of this, whether it's the act of truly seeing, locating and translating sight, or honoring the humbling forces of nature, is easily accomplished. But by Tony Foster's philosophical engagement with his subject and his inclusion of text, artifacts, found objects, and maps, his paintings display an absolutely contemporary sensibility. Our artistic director stewards relationships with several museums interested in sharing Tony Foster's watercolor diaries and complete journeys, including the Yale Center for British Art, London's Royal Watercolor Society and Royal Geographical Society, Museum of Northern Arizona, Buffalo Bill Center for the West, Phoenix Art Museum, and the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. The Foster is a gathering place for art, wilderness, educational, and community programs and events. When the pandemic hit and the Foster temporarily closed, we expanded our dynamic online programming. The Foster has an extensive YouTube channel and website. Through our monthly newsletter over these 15 months, we are, one by one, delving into the 15 regions around the globe that Tony visited to find inspiration and paint his journey exploring beauty, Watercolor Diaries from the Wild. Each newsletter introduces a new episode of the following programs: Art Lessons by Matthias Lannis, inspired by the artworks in Tony Foster's journey.
The detailed starry haze we see in this piece is an unusual texture for watercolor. In today's demonstration, I'll be using masking fluid, or Frisket, which is a latex-based watercolor resist, to create a starry sky effect. If you're following along with today's demonstration, besides the basic watercolor kit I describe in my materials video, you'll need the following additional supplies.
Anna and Violet explore beauty.
That the bird is then incapable of flight.
What? That fish must have been huge.
Anna and her niece Violet lead young artist explorers on adventures through each of Tony Foster's painting locations in this journey. There are activity links too. Make your own binoculars to better spot the adventures ahead.
I bet it would be hard to paint in the dark.
In these recorded excerpts, Tony takes a fresh look back at his exploration surrounding the creation of his exploring beauty journey.
What was Maria Teresa Ruiz's reasoning behind her nominating the night skies of the Atacama for your exploring beauty journey? Has she explained this reasoning?
I suppose it's pretty self-evident, really, that as an astronomer, she's thinking about where one could see the best examples of the night sky. And the Atacama is obviously the premier place. It's dry. There's very little population, so there's very little pollution. If you're up at Alma, you're 16,500 feet up in the mountain, and so therefore you're closer to your target. So from her point of view, that would be the most beautiful thing on earth, I'm sure.
You can find these online programs on our website and YouTube channel.
I do feel a genuine inspiration in these places. They're just the sheer majesty and beauty of them, and the extraordinary nature of them is enough to kind of fire my desire to do the work. I do feel I've got a bit of a mission to proselytize for wild places and say how valuable they are to us and that they shouldn't be destroyed. And so I guess it's a combination of those two things, but of the two, inspiration is the most important. You couldn't work without it.
Thanks for visiting the Foster, an oasis in a hectic world. We look forward to having you with us. Please stay in touch.
So when years ago when I first saw Tony's work, I think I saw part of your Sierra Nevada series on the John Muir Trail.
That's right. That's the one that must have been. That was my first exhibition in California.
And so I guess I got on the ground floor of your California gig here, and I'm really happy that it absolutely rocked my world because I had been sketching in those same mountains. I love those mountains. The sense that I got from looking at your drawings and those paintings, it really put me back in the place. And not all artworks do that. I think you have to really spend time in a place to get a sense of its light, of the feeling of it. And perhaps it's because of the large format of what you do. It forces you to be out there taking the time. You've come up with a system that requires you to be immersed in a place. Whereas a lot of people will just kind of come up and go like, oh, that's pretty, click. They've got a photograph of it. They're going to try to copy that. Oh. And that's sort of the antithesis of what you're up to.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. And I've always thought really that the longer I spend in a place, the better the work gets. And as a fellow painter, you'll know that the more you absorb yourself into the subject, the more you're going to tell your truth about it. It's about telling my own truth about what it is I see in front of me, or what I experience, and what I feel about it. And in order to do that, you have to absorb yourself in it. And if you're only, looking at it through a camera lens for a 30th of a second, then that's not much of an experience. Whereas if you're living in it for weeks or months, then that all reflects in the work somehow, I think. And also, of course, by adding not just painting the landscape itself, but by adding the other elements of my work, the maps, the notes, the diary entries, the what I call souvenirs, the objects that I bring back, the studies of those, and so on. It's a sort of holistic approach to what I'm finding on my travels, really, on my journey. And I think that people respond very directly to that. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, first time I went to France, when I was about 14, I can remember coming home with cigarette packets and, with French on them, and French matchboxes. And in a way, I suppose I've just I've sort of refined that practice, really, because I simply come back with often quite mundane objects, which I incorporate into the work, but it's a trigger for me, reminding me. So as the French word souvenir, it means to remember, and it is a trigger for remembering things.
Souvenir is French for to remember.
Yes.
Oh, that takes it to another level. So I have to write this down, because otherwise I forget. That is, and because that's just at the heart of what our nature journaling practice is about. I think of the nature journal. It's not a sort of a place to sort of show off a portfolio. This is the best chance for my brain and my heart to both connect with a place and to keep that experience alive, to remember it. And I know that just, the very act of sitting down and making a little sketch of a place, that spot is in my memory forever. But
that's absolutely right.
But after spending 23 days at a place with that same sort of, I look at that monumental canvas you did of Grand Canyon, and it's like every little mesa is there. You're taking your time and you're paying attention to, and you are giving love and respect and dignity to every little sort of turn of the canyon, and it's an intricate landscape.
Yeah, well, yes, and you're right. It's about concentrating, really. But I've also found that I mean, I never use photographs. So I say never. I've used them twice. I think in I don't know how many 100 paintings I've done. Once was the night sky in the Atacama, because it was so darn cold I just couldn't function. And also, of course, it was dark, so that was the other disadvantage.
I was wondering how you managed to do that. As like, the minute you put, like, say, a headlamp down on the piece of paper, you've just lost your night vision. And then if you try to do that with a red filter on, that's going to slightly alter your colors. Exactly.
So that was the reason I used a photograph for that one. And then another one was when I was climbing a mountain called Le Concabur in Bolivia. And I got to, it was a 19,500 foot mountain. I got to 18,500 feet and passed out. And so I had to hike back down again. And because I discovered it was my altitude ceiling. And I thought, I can't waste this entire experience that I've had. So I quickly took a photograph. Once I managed to stand up again, I quickly took a photograph of where I was. And then when I got back down, I took a photograph of the mountain. And I put those two little paintings and put those two together. but those are the only time I can remember when I've ever used a photograph. And I find that having spent a long time concentrating on something, I can remember it pretty well. I remember once that exhibition that you saw, you may not remember this, but in the California Academy of Sciences, they asked me if I would leave a painting just as I brought it in from the field. In other words, I hadn't done any work on it in the studio. So I had a beautiful painting of a juniper tree, quite a 20 by 30 inch painting, quite a nice painting. I think it was rolled up in a cabinet, they had it. And anyway, so that was an unfinished painting. And when the exhibition was delivered back to my dealer in San Francisco, that painting was missing. And so we said, what's happened to it? Anyway, they conducted a search, couldn't find it, and concluded it must have been stolen. And of course the insurance wouldn't pay because it was an unfinished painting, and the whole thing was a write-off. But about 3 years later, the gallery phoned me up from San Francisco and said, hey Tony, you'll never guess, we came into work this morning, guess what was rolled up on the doorstep? That old painting of yours from the California Academy of Sciences, the juniper tree. What do you want to do with it? And I said, well, would you send it back to me here? I'll see if I can do something with it. So I said, I remember, it's a nice painting. They posted it back to me, and I sat and put it on the easel and just finished it from memory. Well, so that was probably 3.5 years since I'd actually sat and done it. And yet I could remember perfectly well, what the place looked like and what I felt about it at the time, and finished it without having to consult any photographs, because I didn't have any probably. I mean, I do take photographs of my friends, sitting around campfires, or everybody sitting having a miserable time somewhere. But I don't use photographs for the paintings themselves.
That is a great example for some of my lectures, because I talk about sort of the impact of the part of your brain that actually does memory is the same part of your brain that is involved in paying attention. So when you force yourself, what you're really doing is you cannot sit there in the field and make a painting of the juniper without paying attention and paying attention and paying attention. And what our brains tend to do is you kind of look at something, and then your brain goes, okay, I got it, we're on to the next thing, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
But if you're painting that, and I especially imagine that doing the large format, what I love about my journal is that it slows me down. It slows me down. It makes me take the time in a place. And this is that times, well, like if you double the size of a picture, so if I take one picture and I double its size, I actually now have 4 times as much work to do, right? You have to spend 4 times. And so that's one reason I actually kind of recommend to people, like when you're out there in the field and you kind of are in a hurry, like make these, I call them landscapitos. So I'm kind of like pushing people towards the opposite end of the spectrum, which would be like, which to you must sort of sound like, ADD or something, that you can actually finish a watercolor of a place that's this big in a matter of minutes.
Right.
But you are like, do you have any of your like the tubes and stuff, like in order to like even to bring the materials out there, you've had to invent sort of special gear for those sorts of logistics.
Well, true.
But what I love about it is that my journal slows me down. You're somebody who, and this is actually probably one of the most respectful things I could say to somebody. Your process slows you down even more than mine, and I've got such deep respect for that. I think that's so cool.
Well, yes, I used to be very frustrated at one time with my painting style because I thought, oh God, I wish I could paint like Winslow Homer, where you could sum up a landscape in a dozen masterful brush strokes, you know, and there the whole thing was immediately in front of you, you know, just with the quickest. You can imagine they wouldn't take very long, his paintings, but they are masterly. And I used to think, why can't I paint like that? And so I took out a 6-foot sheet of paper out to the Grand Canyon, and I thought, this is going to force me to paint quicker. You know, I'm going to get away from this dab, dab, dab thing that I've got and really break out. And I sat there, I think I was there for 12 days, and I stood up at the end of it. I thought, damn it, all is just the same thing, but more Fosse. It's just bigger. It's exactly the same style. And my dealer at the time said, Tony, just don't worry about it. Relax with it. Your style is your style. You can't change it. Don't fret about it. And of course, it's like your handwriting. You can't change it. It is who you are, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I guess I'm just a person that just needs to you know, to work things out as you say, in a slow way. I slowly work it out. I sort of grope towards a solution rather than arrive at a solution very quickly.
It's the you're the slow food movement of future journaling.
I guess that's right. I've got to say though that
it makes the best sauce. It makes the best sauce, Tony. I got to tell you.
Well, one thing I've got to say though is that one facility I don't have, or one skill I don't have, is the skill you have, which is, I mean, I couldn't capture, you know, a kingfisher on the wing, or you know, even a sparrow on the wing. I mean, I'm perfectly competent to do a heron because it stands still. But you know, a sparrow in flight, not for me. But I really admire your skill at doing that. I mean, you know, it is a different kind. You must have a different kind of memory, I think, than the one I've got. I mean, I see a sparrow and I think, okay, I think I know what that looks like, but I can't. But you get it absolutely perfectly, and so that's a different memory you've got than the one I've got, I think.
Yeah, something I think would be fun if you're game for it, would be once this virus passes, I would love to spend some time in the field with you.
Yeah, it's worth a try.
And
yeah.
Both of us spend.
I think you might get bored.
Well, no. What I'm thinking is that the two of us just sort of spend time in a place, just geeking out. You doing your thing, me doing my thing. By the way, I'm a good Sherpa. And then in the evening over the campfire, just to sort of compare notes about what we thought and how we saw, and that.
Sure, that'd be interesting. Yeah.
It would be interesting. It would be interesting.
Yeah, it would.
Do you have any, just there's a lot of people who are watching this who are makers. So people
Sure.
coming to Wild Wonder, they're people who are makers. They're kind of like, okay, you know, what do you do? I was wondering just about, in sort of first just logistics. Do you have any sort of samples of your gear with
Sure.
you on hand here that you could kind of hold up? We saw some of it on the video, and like for instance, I'm amazed. Like your big canvas, your palette is smaller than mine, right?
Yeah, it's tiny.
I'm a small canvas. My palette is bigger than yours. And so just I'm kind of wondering about just sort of mechanics and some logistics here.
Okay.
How are you making that work?
Okay, well, I'll have to take these out because I've got my stuff behind me and I need to pick it up, and I'm going to just take these off a second.
Okay, that's right. So while he's doing that, so my canvas is just this big. So, you know, that's rather large format for me.
Okay, we'll start with the big stuff. This is my aluminium tube, or as you say, aluminum. My aluminum tube, which I roll my paper up inside this tube. This is not the biggest tube I've got. I've got a bigger one than this. I've also got a smaller one, depending on what I'm doing. But this one, I guess, is about 4 feet. Is it? Yeah, about 4 feet. and as you can see, it's slightly battered. It's like me. It's had a sort of hard life. And so all my paper, I use Bockingford 180-pound paper. I buy I buy a roll of it, which is 100 feet long, and I just cut off what I need. And so if I'm doing an enormous painting, then I take enormous sheets and so on. And it's beautiful paper. It's a beautiful bright white. It takes quite a bashing. I know that people say you can't, once you put the mark down with watercolor, you can't ever get it out again. But if you're quick with Bockingford, and you've got clean water, you can lift off any mistake as long as you're very quick at it. And this is I don't know quite how we're going to be able to do this, but this is the drawing board that I invented, which opens up. That's the back. And you can see it's been routed out so that it's light. It's made out of marine ply. It's made out of marine ply, so of course it doesn't fall apart when it gets wet. It folds up. That's just 2 sections, and in fact I can make this into 4 sections, which makes it, let's think, that's 3 feet, makes it 6 feet long by 3 feet. I've also got one which is 7 feet long by 4 feet, which is a damn cumbersome thing to carry about. This one fits on the back of a backpack, and you can strap it on, and it's got holes all around the edge so that you can lash it down to the landscape with tent pegs, and you can lash it to a tree or lash it to a rock or do something so it won't blow away in a high wind. So those are the 2 big bits which are heavy, or comparatively heavy. Then this is my brush tube. Actually, I lent this to the foundation and they put it in their case, but I couldn't find one as good as this, so I got this one back and gave them one which wasn't really so good. It's to put my brushes in. One failing I have is that I always carry far too many brushes. Look at them all. I mean, it's ridiculous. The weight of brushes. I'm obsessed with weight. How much things much things weigh. But anyway, all my brushes in here. A huge variety of brushes. I love these Isabey squirrel hair brushes, which are very, very useful brushes. A couple of several flat brushes. My all-time favorite, of course, is a number 6 Kolinsky sable. I used to use Winsor & Newton. I don't think they're quite as good now as they used to be, and I've gone on now to Da Vinci, which are very, very high quality sables. I mean, a big sable is a very expensive thing. A number 6 is I think about 40 pounds, so that's about $60 now. And a number 10, which I've also got, is probably about 100 pounds or $150. So they're expensive. I've got some chisel, ox hair chisels. I've got all sorts, and some of the most useful ones are some of the ones I've had forever and ever. I'm trying to find one. No, can't find it. Oh, yes, I can. There it is. You'll never believe it, but this brush here.
Oh, it looks loved.
I stole that from my wife. My wife was an art student too, and she's an artist. Anyway, I stole that from her. This she had when she was at art school. Okay, we're both in our 70s, and she was at art school when she was 20. I stole this from her, and what it's wonderful for is if you want to do, leaves of trees or put little bushes or things in the distance, it's perfect for that. So never throw away a worn out brush, because it might well come in useful. So that's the brush. It's also inside that tube is an eraser. I do use an eraser and a sponge. Okay, they all fit inside that. They all fit inside the tube.
That's nice.
I cut.
Just so
you see, I cut the tube down. I cut bits off it to save weight. I'll do anything to save a quarter of an ounce. This, for example, I have to have tea every 2 hours, and this is my mug. I cut the handle off it to save weight, and also it fits more neatly into a backpack if you haven't got a handle.
What's cool about that is like you're cutting the handle off of your mug. At the same time, you're bringing in these huge easels and things, but like, like routing out the inside. That's the kind of, that's cool. That's just cool. Yeah. And sort of in contrast, my brush collection are 2 plastic water brushes. And one of them has a round point, one of them has a chisel point, and that's
it?
That's it. That's my brush collection. And there are these little kind of plastic things with the water inside the handle. And
I have seen them. I didn't realize they were. I didn't realize, to be perfectly honest, I was very suspicious of them. I couldn't see how they could possibly work, but they evidently do work if you use them.
It's fun. And part of it is like it's like if you want to like drive a photographer nuts, you go to their exhibition and you kind of walk up to one of their paintings and you go like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. What kind of camera do you use? Right?
Yeah.
That as if it's the tool that does it. Right?
That's right. Yes.
And
if I only had that tool, I could do it. Yeah.
And so maybe what we're seeing here is that you look at your tools, you look at my tools. I have small brushes, big palette. You have big brushes, small palette, like yours, that little kind of cigarette box.
Here it is, this little thing.
Yeah, and mine, I've got a bigger palette.
Well, you don't need all that.
You don't do it. And so what I'm saying is that it's not. You've got big paper. I've got small paper, and we're both essentially we're using these as tools to kind of enter more deeply into the world.
Yeah,
and
of course.
And it's not what technique you're using. It's not what brush you're using. It's the fact that you are using that brush.
Yeah, it's the way you use it.
Yes,
of course. And everybody will find what suits them best. I mean, I must admit, I do kind of smile sometimes when I see a beginner watercolorist, and they have a watercolor paint box the size of a piano keyboard, and I think, well, I'm doing huge paintings in this tiny box, and you're working on your little sketchbook with a thing on your knee that you could just crush you under it. So yeah, but everybody in the end, by practice, you learn what works for you, and I don't think there are any hard and fast rules. Do you?
No. Well, my grandmother, Beatrice Chalice, gave me the best advice early on, and she said, Jack dear, she said, honey, there are no rules. Just play with it, keep doing it, have fun with it, and you'll find your way in this. There's so many different ways, but the idea of but you still have to show up for it. You need to you got to show up for it, and that's what is going to open those doors. And just sort of speaking of showing up for it, I was wondering if could have you, like, you've been all over this planet. You've been at Everest base camps. You've been, in the desert, in the tropical rainforests, doing these different journeys, finding these places. You're doing this practice that helps sort of enhance your memory. So you go into this place, it transforms you. I was wondering if, as you kind of look back over these journeys and the time spent in communion with these places, in deep observation in nature, how has this changed who you are as a person, as a can you think of any? I know this might be a sort of an odd question, but in terms of how you interact with other people, with the world, with nature, how has this level of intensive, rigorous work changed who you are at your core?
Well, I guess I would say that it has. I mean, as the more I've done of it, the more obviously um, the more I under the more practice I get at it, the more self-confident I become, or self-reliant, I should say. I mean, I don't want to pretend that I spend all my time on my own in the backcountry. I mean, I have spent plenty of time on my own. Occasionally, I've spent up to 2 or 3 weeks without, or certainly up to 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, without ever seeing a single human being, not even in the way in the distance, or no mark of human beings. I've just been completely on my own in the rainforest and in the Grand Canyon a couple of times, and in all sorts of places. But that's not general. If I can find somebody to come, then I would much prefer to have people with me. But nonetheless, having done that, having spent long periods completely on my own in the middle of nowhere, just working on my paintings, you do realize actually what you can, that you are actually capable of looking after yourself in quite difficult circumstances, without help. But as I say, I much prefer to have people with me if I possibly can. I like company. I don't want people talking to me when I'm working. But on the other hand, when I'm back in camp in the evening by the campfire, I love to have somebody to talk to. I'm a sociable kind of guy. So it's I suppose self-reliance and self-confidence have increased. But also what I've discovered is that things seldom work out as badly as you think they're going to. You know that you're going into, something that could actually be quite, sometimes, I wouldn't say dangerous very often. Occasionally it's a bit dangerous, but generally speaking, it's more just difficult. And you're going into that, and you realize that actually, you're ready for all sorts of terrible things to happen. But generally speaking, they don't. Generally speaking, you find that although you obviously occasionally things do happen. I mean, if you have a bear run at you, then those things happen. But generally it doesn't happen, and you meet up with people, and most people are not unpleasant. Most people are really friendly. Most people are hospitable. Most people are helpful. And when you come across people in the middle of nowhere, generally speaking, people respond very, very well. And particularly, I think they respond well to painters. Wherever I go, I find that people are intrigued. They're excited by the fact that you're there for a special purpose. They love to be engaged with what you're doing. And people give as much help as they possibly can for you to achieve what you want to achieve. And people get very involved with it. I mean, if you're in the middle of nowhere in some tribal area, people get involved in it and they try to help. They want you to succeed, and they get quite disappointed if you don't succeed. If you end up at the end of, a couple of weeks and you say, well, this painting hasn't worked out as well as I hoped it would, then they're as disappointed as you are, sometimes more so. And that's always very gratifying. And so all these things sort of come together and of course, I suppose in a way I would also say, my paintings are getting better and better. And I think once they stop getting better, then I'll stop doing it. I mean, as an artist yourself, that you're always trying to achieve the impossible, the perfect painting. And I've never achieved it yet. I don't know about you, perhaps you have. And I reckon if you did achieve the perfect painting, you would stop, because how much further can you go than that? But I've never done that yet, so I'm going to keep on going, and probably philosophically realize I never will achieve that. But I think my painting is getting better, partly because of this build-up in confidence and practice and so on. But of course, you also have just I mean, you do have terrible times. It's not all great. You know, it's not all a picnic. There are times when you're, you know, washed out of your tent and everything's freezing cold, and you know, and there's been a rainstorm and you've broken your tent pole, and the you know, the tent's collapsed, your sleeping bag soaking wet, and there are those moments when you would rather be absolutely anywhere else rather than where you are, and you think this is just the most pitiful way to make a living. This is ridiculous. You know, I'm an intelligent person. What on earth made me choose this? But then there are times of enormous magic when something happens which you just think, whoa, if I wasn't here at this moment, I would never have seen such a thing. And those, every time that happens to you, that you're in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. And you have to make yourself vulnerable for those opportunities to come to you. You have to.
Yeah, you have to be open to them, I think. And like I say, I mean, I can remember one particular. I mean, I've had lots of magic moments. I would say I've been very fortunate. I mean, but I mean, things stick in your mind. Like I remember once I was up on Mount Rainier when I was doing my volcano series, and we were camped in the snow, way up. Not, you know, I can't remember how high, but pretty high. Camped in a big snowbank, and I got up in the morning, and we were above the clouds, and so where we were was clear, but below us was a cloud bank. And I stood up on this ridge, and the sun was behind me, and I could see my shadow perfectly on the cloud, outlined, completely beautifully outlined with a rainbow.
Yes.
I don't. Yeah. Who knows how that happens? I have no idea. I mean, I'm sure physicists could tell you, but physicists wouldn't have experienced that magic. It was magic to me, and those things would never happen if you don't actually just go out somewhere and take time.
But also part of it, I think, is that because you have practiced paying attention so much, that when you are in those moments where there is wonder and beauty around you, you're even better able to take it in, because you have trained yourself to be present and to pay attention to subtle things, to little things. So when there is, when you're in a moment of utter awe like that, you have taken your skills of observation and being present and ramped them up so much that I think you actually are able to take even more in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. Yes, I mean, I was thinking it was more, like I say, being just a matter of being in the right place at the right time. But you're right. You have to have the time to think about it and see it and absorb it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just jumping back to what you're saying before about, you know, the perfect painting. So I would yes, when you do the perfect painting, then stop. But here's the thing: the perfect painting, by definition, is never going to happen, right? No. Because we're always constantly growing. You're constantly growing, and the brushstrokes you make today are built on the brushstrokes you made yesterday. But the brushstrokes from today are the foundation of the brushstrokes that you're going to make tomorrow. And so you're always doing this. So there is no destination up there. We're in a process, and it's always getting better, and it's always going to get better. And it doesn't get better if we don't do the process. But as long as we are in here with this process, our skills are developing. And so that way I can say, yes, when I do the perfect journal page, then I can guarantee everybody I'm going to stop. But I know that sort of built into my definition of this is that's nonsense, because that page will never appear. And I know that when you do that page, if you're like, oh, maybe it's one that you really like. Okay, great. But you keep doing that, it's then going to become the foundation for other sorts of things.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, because you're right. I mean, it is a terrible cliche that it's not the destination, it's the journey. But of course, that is the truth of it. We're all of us on a journey. After all, our lives are a journey from birth to death. And it's what we make of them on the way that is the important thing. And we all know the destination.
Yes.
It's the graveyard. So let's not rush to get there.
Yeah, and you know, I read a poem this morning by Mary Oliver, and she ends it. She says, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?"
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
that's very nice. Yeah,
and the example that she's giving, she's paying attention to an element in nature. She's looking at a grasshopper, right? And what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And at the end of the day, there will be no regrets about spending that time, even in those most miserable moments when the tent has collapsed and your sleeping bag is wet. You're not going to be saying to yourself, "I really wish I didn't do that."
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, at the time, as I say, you wish you were somewhere else, but
yes,
but you're quite right. I mean, I can remember once when it became plain that I was on an expedition, and it became plain that we could all die, and we all had to face the fact that we might die, and I can remember thinking at the time when it became perfectly obvious that if one more thing went wrong, then we were done for. I can remember thinking, well, I've done what I've always made my own choices about what I want to do. I'm here in the most beautiful place, and if this is where it ends up, then I have no regrets about what I've done so far. That was really, it was a sort of very philosophical thought, considering, and it may well be that had it really gone one more stage serious, then I might have started backpedaling on that thought. But at the time, I can remember thinking, well, I have no regrets. I've done exactly what I wanted to do up to this point, and if this is the end of it, then that's I consider I've spent my life as well as I can.
Yeah, the idea to, and sometimes it takes moments of death or near death to help shake us out of the complacency of a routine that perhaps is not giving you the opportunities that you want. For me, when I wrote a field guide about the Sierra Nevada mountains, and to do that, I spent 7 years backpacking in the Sierra Nevada, drawing all the different plants that I saw, and the birds and the flowers, and the making maps of how the cloud formations, all those sorts of things. That had been a project that had been in the back of my head for years. I sort of said, like, at some point I would love to make that field guide. And I always sort of saw myself out there with my backpack and kind of hiking along the trails and sitting down, drawing the flowers. And that was what I really wanted to do. But I was doing other things. I wasn't living that life. And it was when my grandmother was dying, Beatrice Chalice, I mentioned her earlier. I went down to Southern California and spent a lot of time at her deathbed, just sort of taking care of her. If she kind of woke up and was more lucid, there'd be somebody that would be from the family that would be there with her. I got a lot of night shifts. And so I spent time thinking about like, what is it that I want? What is it I want to have my life been about? And when I'm in that bed, and I had time there with her to think about this, and she was sort of my artistic muse. I think her last gift to me was permission to take the risk to quit my job, to fill my backpack up with paper, and to head off to the mountains to start that project. And it then changed the complete trajectory of my life.
Yeah, that's a marvelous thing. It's a marvelous thing, isn't it? And to understand, to be able to think back and think that was the turning point, because people often wonder how it is that you can launch yourself off into such a life. I'm sure that people say the same to you. How do you actually get started? How do you, and to be able to put your finger on it and say, well, that was the moment. That's a very important important thing you've got there. It's a treasured thing in your past.
It was a turning point for me that and then the serendipity of life sort of brings you to, well, where we are right now having this conversation.
Yeah.
But if that hadn't happened, I don't think I would have taken that trajectory.
I can see we're getting close to the edge here. Can I just read you something? I remember I in one of our conversations I talked about a quote from Goethe that has always been important to me, and I've actually found it. Now I wonder if I could read it out to you. Would you like to hear it?
I would love to. I've actually got when you started saying that, I grabbed my pen.
It's quite long. It's quite long. It says, until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from that decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamt would have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. And I've found that's been absolutely true. Whenever I've been hesitant about a series or a project or a journey that I was going to do, then nothing ever clicked into place. And as soon as I committed myself to it wholeheartedly and said, this is what I'm going to do, then all of a sudden, all sorts of things happen which actually make it possible for it to happen.
And that begin it now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's bold and it's audacious. And that same idea, it applies to thinking about ourselves personally and the skills that we develop, to our relationships with other people, to what we want to see happening in the fabric of our society and our community, to how we as a species interact with the world. And I know that you are a committed steward of nature.
Sure.
You have also, worked to develop schools in areas where you have, where you've been doing journeys and projects. The same idea of to take initiative and to start things happening in your own life that you want to see happen. And not that there's some magic. I don't sort of buy the thing that you kind of you want something so it magically manifests for you.
No.
It's work. It's work, and chance favors the prepared mind. And so there's going to be work, but this can also apply to not just what is happening in our personal lives, but if we decide that actually the trajectory that our planet is taking, as our society is taking, changing those sort of things is audacious. And to have the same sort of boldness to engage with those things as a steward of nature, as an artist, as somebody working to enhance community and justice, equality, love, stewardship, art, all those sorts of things. Those are things that we can do. I absolutely love that quote.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
again,
I hope you're right. I mean, I love the quote, and I think it's great. But I don't know if you saw David Attenborough's recent film about species extinction, but it's happening at an alarming rate, and it's absolutely terrifying. And so all my energies at the moment are devoted to raising money for the charities that I've been discussing this with David Attenborough, and so I'm devoting my energy at the moment to trying to raise money to give to a couple of charities that he has suggested would be most effective, because I don't think there's much point in me spending my time, chained to a tree. Although I admire people who do that, chain themselves to a tree to prevent it being cut down. But I think my time is best spent doing the things I do best, which is to make paintings and to try and not just raise people's consciousness, but to try and raise some money too to back that up. And so, as I say, I admire people who take direct action to try and prevent some terrible terrible desecration of a wonderful place. But there's not much point in me sitting there, when I could be doing something I think is probably more suitable to the skills I possess.
yep. And so, but also know that you are part of a team with those people. None of us are alone. So in the nature journaling community, we are a community supporting each other to do this. And same as a community of stewards, there are people working at different levels to together make an impact and to make a difference. And but if we believe that we cannot make a difference, then there's no reason to start. But if we believe that through our actions we can develop new skills, that through our actions we can change this world, there's a reason to have hope, there's a reason to start, there's a reason to work together. And so as artists, as journalers, as stewards of nature, we have seen many times in the past where human beings are capable of beauty and good and wonder. And this is a powerful and a savage and a beautiful species that we're a part of.
Yeah,
and we are capable of, in addition to destruction, we're capable of great good. And
well, and of course, I hope that we are intelligent. There's no question about it. So we hope that our intelligence can be used for good rather than the opposite, and that we will come round to the fact that this is the only planet we've got. We've got to damn well look after it. But I think you've made some excellent points there. I just endorse them all. I mean, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, I think also I would say that, of course, to be an artist is to be an optimist. You couldn't possibly be an artist if you weren't an optimist, because after all, there could hardly be a more difficult and chancy way to make a living. And yet, so if you launch yourself off on that career, you have to be damned optimistic, because you're going to come up against all sorts of problems which you have to overcome in order to survive. And so I guess we are optimists, and so we share that common hope that our actions can make some difference, and that other people will get it too, which of course many people do. Thank God.
Yes. Tony, it has been an absolute delight and a pleasure to speak with you again.
Well, thank you.
And there's much more to come on this adventure, and I really look forward to following more of your work. So grateful to you for dedicating your life to this, for your inspiration to me and to other journalers and artists, and Also to the Foster Museum that has celebrated and sponsored your work, giving you kind of a sturdy platform from which to share your passion and to inspire others to protect and to celebrate those places. They're also a sponsor of this conference, so gratitude to them as well. I, with my terrible sense of time, I'm not sure if we've.
Yeah, Jack, this is a good time to go to Q&A if you'd like to move to it.
That's what I was going to ask. I was going to see if this was our Q&A time.
Somebody's listening.
Yes, so that's Melinda Nakagawa, a host of the Monterey chapter of the Nature Journal Club, and also a nature journaling teacher. And she's been going through the Q&A and selecting out questions that would be particularly interesting and for us to discuss. Could you help us out by feeding us some prompts and questions?
Sure. Actually, Natalie is here.
Natalie.
She has been manning the Q&A session, so she's going to ask a few questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Natalie.
Great. Natalie, thank you so much for volunteering with us and helping us run this conference. Really appreciate it.
Hello. Thank you for so much, both of you, for an incredible conversation. It was amazing listening to you both talk. We have a few questions here. I thought we could start out with one that 4 people asked. Kate, Libby, Todd, and Jenny all asked, what colors, if you know the names of the colors, Tony, in your small palette?
I'm just going to find my palette. Well, let me see. I certainly could probably get through them all. Viridian, which is that orangey color, you can see that one there. That's probably been in that box for at least 2 years. It shows how little I use that. I could probably save a 1/10 of an ounce by gouging that one out. Permanent rose, alizarin crimson, light red, Indian red, ivory black, raw umber, burnt umber, raw sienna, burnt sienna, Payne's grey, Prussian blue, Windsor yellow, a cadmium yellow, Windsor green, vermilion, Hooker's green, cerulean blue, yellow ochre, cobalt blue, French ultramarine. How's that?
That's great. Thank you.
And that's primarily Winsor Newton.
Yeah, all Winsor Newton.
All Winsor Newton paint.
Yeah. I hope those listeners or those watchers managed to write all that down.
Okay, but so my question, my follow-up question on that one for you is, you mentioned like I haven't used that one for a while. I might gouge that one out. Do you find that over time your palette changes? You're popping some colors out and then adding in other colors, or has that been your set for a long period of time?
Well, it depends. I do change them about depending on what I'm painting. Actually, if I'm going into a desert, then I put in many more browns and ochres and yellows and the kind of colors you find more often in the desert. If I'm going to the rainforest, then I might add a couple of different greens. But I find that it's pretty much standard, really. But I have found actually that the color palette of my paintings has got stronger recently. I've been doing some trees recently, some Cornish trees being covered in this almost luminous moss, and they're very. People think I'm overcooking it somehow. I'm exaggerating, but in fact, if you go and look at the light catching that fantastic moss, it is almost luminous. It's extraordinary, and I think my use of color is getting more powerful. Maybe because I'm getting older, maybe my eyesight's fading. I don't know, but I think they're getting more. The colors I'm actually using colors more intensely now, I think, than I used to.
Very cool.
That's great. I'm from Devon. I'm aware of the luminous moss.
Oh, you are? Good. Not many people have seen it over your side of the pond.
And what's also kind of there's so many things that when we we find these little moments in nature. You draw them the way you really see them. Other people look at it and they go like, oh, no way, you got that wrong. You know, skies don't do that, but this one did. And so yeah, when in doubt, believe the moss.
Yeah, exactly.
Good advice. So another quick materials question. Two people, Kirsten and DW, both draw underwater while they're diving, and they'd love to know what kind of materials, particularly what kind of color materials that you use.
Okay. Well, I use I use a plastic drawing board, which is attached to my wrist by a string, so it doesn't float away. I use architect's drafting film, which is a kind of like a plastic paper, really, which is clipped on with bulldog clips. And I use Caran d'Ache crayons, which are slightly water soluble. So if you're sitting on the bottom and you've made, you think you've made a bit of a mistake, you just rub your fingers over it and it'll disappear. So it's like being able to erase it. But provided you don't brush against it, it will stay where it is, where you put it. And the only snag I found is that, I mean, it's perfectly straightforward, really. You put on extra weights so that you sit solidly on the bottom. And you find that the fish, will come, first they disappear, but then they all come back and they look at you to see what on earth you're doing. And so the fish are perfectly good as models, and they get on with their business, and you can draw them doing that. But what you have to do is keep a tight grip on your pencils, because if you loosen your grip, they float up to the top, and you can't, of course, shoot after them because you get an embolism. And so you just have to watch your colors, if you're not careful, floating away on the surface. And so grip your pencils tightly, or put a rubber band around them or something so they don't all float to the surface. And I can remember once I'd been doing it for a couple of weeks, and my paint, somehow or other, I kept forgetting this, and I would lose a pencil every now and again. And by the end of it, I was just I had to look for fish, which all I had left was orange, yellow, purple, and blue. And I thought, I've got to find fish that are that color, because that's all I've got left.
That's so cool. We're going to be taking a nature journaling trip to the Galapagos Islands next year, and I hope that by then to have some of these logistics of underwater drawing worked out, so that we can be doing some of that there.
Wow, I need to talk to you about that, because I want to go to Galapagos to do work on my show about time. I'm doing an exhibition about time, and I want to go to Galapagos.
Sorry to interrupt, Jack. We have 5 minutes left, and just wanted to warn you.
So 5 minutes. Let's grab another question in that time.
Quick.
Thank you so much.
Questions.
Okay. Nina asks, what can nature journalists do in these times? So if you need to shelter in place and you cannot travel for various reasons.
Jack probably should answer that, but I'd just quickly say you better vote.
Yes, that's right. So we can do things both socio-politically, and we can also have an impact on our happiness in our own lives. Nature journaling is a very powerful way to find connection and purpose in these times. So what I have been, there are things that you can do that, number one, yes, we need masks. When we go out, we've got masks. There are places, if you can find places where you can be away from other people, this is good. But remember, by keeping a mask on yourself, you are taking care of other people around you. So wearing a mask is a community. The mask actually protects them more than it protects you. All right? So you want to, and if everybody's doing that, we're all taking care of each other. This is a good thing. But you can also, just in your own home, find little moments of surprise and wonder and beauty and play with those. So this is my sweet potato. This is going to be my nature journaling project for today. This sprouted in my pantry. And isn't that cool? And it's got these crazy little spikes on here, and it's got one leaf that is popped open. And I'm going to nature journal about my sprouting sweet potato. And so it doesn't have to be, I don't know if you didn't tune in for the Nature Journaling Challenge for today. Today's Nature Journaling Challenge is to journal about something, and the goal is to find the extraordinary in the ordinary, and to take some common day object and look at it deeply enough that you start to discover the mysteries that are hiding beyond the point where you usually stop paying attention. And so I've nature journaled about my neighbor's plants. I've nature journaled about the spiders that I found in the corners of my house. I've nature journaled about the onion that sprouted in my pantry, and now this little sweet potato is up next. I nature journaled about the moldy orange. And it doesn't have to be a national park and a moose that gets us to kind of like, oh, I could nature journal, but just the everyday occurrences around us. What Mary Oliver calls the prayers that are made out of grass, just the things that are around us that, to start there and celebrate that. And you can you're training yourself to kind of get into those. Yeah, Tony.
I absolutely endorse that. I've got a little series of pictures upstairs called 10 Days in the Life of a Chili Pepper. And it shows it's simply a chili pepper going from this glorious green, yellow object down to this wrinkled, nice little wrinkled object. And it's just a sheet of studies, really. No point to them, but nonetheless intriguing to me at the time.
Great, Jack. We are going to have to break now, unfortunately, and we can continue this conversation this evening with Tony Foster.
That's right. Want to encourage everybody to join us this evening. Tony and I are going to be back in a pre-recorded, so it's actually going to be this time warped sort of a thing. That this was, you get to see sort of the first big chat between Tony and Jack, and that was a lot of fun, wasn't it?
It was absolutely great, just as this one has been. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me. It's been good fun, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the conference.
It's going to be beautiful.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah. Thank you for asking me.
And again, my deep gratitude to you for your inspiration, and both as an artist and a steward and conservationist. Just so much respect for the way you walk in this world. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.